Hello and welcome to the programme. There's no getting away from the politics of the economy these days. The devolved leaders of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have been in London lambasting the government for what they condemn as its growth-stifling cuts programme. The Secretary of State Owen Paterson will be joining us later to defend the coalition's policies. But the Deputy First Minister, Martin McGuinness, has notched up the rhetoric by claiming that the cuts are undermining the whole edifice of devolution in Northern Ireland. He's with me now. Mr McGuinness, those are strong claims, some might say even inflammatory claims. On what evidence do you base them?
Well, they're not intended to be inflammatory at all. It's dealing with the reality of the situation we have seen over the course of the last comprehensive spending review. The British government effectively renege on commitments that were made by a previous administration and withdraw £4 billion, that's £4,000 million, from our economy over the course of the next number of years, and that's without even mentioning the £1 billion that will also affect us as a result of the changes to
But everyone's in the
payments.
same boat. Why should it undermine democracy or devolution here when it's not even talked about in Scotland or Wales?
Well, it undermines it because we believe that when we make agreements with people, that those agreements should be kept, and the parties which are presently in the executive, with the exception of the Alliance Party, prior to the establishment of the institutions in 2007, had solemn commitments. All of us attended the meeting in Downing Street where Gordon Brown said that the financial package of 18 billion was guaranteed, was ring-fenced and guaranteed, and in fact on the day that Ian Paisley and I stepped forward as First and Deputy First Minister in May 2007, he went into the House of Commons and lodged that statement in the House of Commons. So we do expect that this British government will keep the commitments. Of course, Owen Paterson said then afterwards, whenever he was challenged about our concern over the situation, said that they would keep to the commitments. He has not kept to the commitments. The fact is that we're told to live and we'll get oats, when in fact he talks about this will all come through to 2017. We don't believe it. We believe that the spending plans that we engaged in, for example, under the Labour administration, which allowed us to spend £4.5 billion over the course of the last 3 years. That's on average £1.5 billion.
But you know that the horizon has
to.
changed in those days. The Secretary of State points out that Northern Ireland still has a higher per capita spend under the Barnett formula than Scotland, than Wales, and 25% higher per person than England. How can you complain?
Well, he uses figures that I would be highly sceptical about, and Owen is prone to doing that on quite a number of occasions. The fact is that we have a situation here where, in terms of neglect and social deprivation, we've seen infrastructure neglected for many, many decades by successive British governments. Important infrastructure to do with hospitals, schools, roads, water infrastructure. All of these things were supposed to be issues that we would deal with as a result of the package agreed with Gordon Brown prior to the establishment of the institutions. And this package was actually conditional on the institutions being established, was conditional on the package being there. So we have a situation now where this present British government thinks that they can upset what was an agreement made, which the Irish government were aware of, and which now seriously is to the detriment of ourselves as we go forward, particularly in the context of the damage that it can do to our construction industry over the course of the next 5 to 10 years.
He says, the Secretary of State, that he's asking Northern Ireland to save £1.72 out of every £100 in this cuts regime, and that doesn't seem very much. He points out that any business would be laughing with glee at only having to save that.
And again, I dispute the figures that Owen Paterson puts forward. Hugely sceptical about all of the figures that he puts forward, because what he's trying to do is defend the indefensible. The fact of the matter is that, for example, not alone have they withdrawn the £4 billion, but as Peter Robinson rightly has said, they've also stolen £300 million by refusing to give us access to the end-year flexibility. And there are funds there, over 300 million, that we could use for both hospitals and for schools and for all other frontline services.
You could introduce water charges. One thing you could do would bring in £500 million, but you refuse to do that.
People pay water charges in their rates, and we have absolutely made it clear that at a time of great economic distress, that we have no intention whatsoever of introducing water charges.
But it is a place you could raise money, the only place that Northern Ireland can raise money right now, and you refuse to do it.
Well, it's not the only place that we can raise money, because in the course of the putting together of the draft budget, we were faced with a shortfall of £4 billion. And as a result of the negotiations that took place between us, we were able to come up with £800 million, which will minimise the damage done to our economic prospects in the future, and are now presently working on another package, hopefully of something in the region of 800 million, which can be then, if you like, an added bonus as we go forward for distribution among the departments. So we haven't been powerless, but one thing that you have to remember is that we need to be given the tools, the economic tools. We need to be given the economic levers. And presently we don't have that. That's why we were in London yesterday, not alone at the meeting of the Joint Ministerial Council, where we had huge support from Scotland and from Wales. And remember, we issued a joint declaration which was very critical of the British government's cuts as being too deep and too fast. Yeah. Also the need for access to lending for small and medium businesses, and also the whole issue of stabilisers for fuel, which also can impact on our economy and impacts on Wales and Scotland.
We don't know what George Osborne's going to do about that in the next fuel increase. But aren't you really, this is just sort of political rhetoric. I mean, the government has said Northern Ireland has been treated fairly, Scotland's been treated fairly, Wales has been treated fairly. This is the way it is going to be, and you are just going to have to operate it as indeed you are.
Well, we don't accept that this is the way that it should be. We believe that when governments make commitments, they should keep to them. And whenever you have the three devolved institutions, Celtic institutions effectively saying to the London government that we don't accept the way in which you're dealing with this. I mean, when I was in London the day before yesterday and yesterday, a poll was done which asked the people in Britain what they thought of how this government was handling the economy, and overwhelmingly over 60% of the people thought they were making a mess of it, and that they also believed, more importantly, and I actually predicted this many months ago at a meeting in the Cabinet Office, that the strategy and policy being adopted by these multi-millionaires who are controlling the government in London would lead us into a double-dip recession.
They will say that there are difficult times ahead, there are unpopular decisions to take. No opinion poll is going to say a government which is cutting public spending is popular, but it has to be done. Well,
I think the difficulty that the coalition government are faced into is, if that's what people are saying now, what will they be saying when the cuts begin to bite? And I think that could be a very destabilising factor between the coalition partners, the Liberal Democrats and the Tories. And I think it would raise question marks as to whether or not this government would survive. Now, from our perspective, what we have to do is fight our own corner. And we have made it absolutely clear to the British government that we expect them to keep to the commitments that were made. And at the Joint Ministerial Council meeting, I actually lodged an official dispute which now has to be dealt with under the auspices
but in the meantime, economic life goes on. Sinn Féin ministers have put forward their department budgets. There are cross-sector meetings deciding how best to implement the cuts, but it's all about implementing the cuts, not fighting them.
Well, the big difference between what's happening in Dublin, for example, and what's happening here is that the politicians and the powers that be in Dublin had the economic levers under their control, and they made a mess of it. These were the people who described Sinn Féin during the 2007 general election as economic illiterates. The people of Ireland can now see who the economic illiterates are.
Well, you voted for the banking bailout.
No, we didn't vote for the banking bailout. No, in the initial stages.
Yes, in the initial stages.
But then we voted against it whenever we saw...
when you saw it was going wrong, you voted against it.
No, absolutely not. Whenever we made our own analysis that people were not going to be protected, that this was not to do with the protection
but you supported
of
the
citizens,
initial banking support
that this was to do,
which led to all the other trouble.
This was to do with the protection of banks, which we were totally and absolutely opposed to. Now, let me just outline what I said just a few seconds ago. They had the economic levers under their control, and they drove the economy into the ground. We don't have the economic levers at our control. We are under the auspices of a British government which is led by multi-millionaires who haven't got a clue, in my opinion, about what it's like for people to live in a working class housing estate. And that's why we are going to continue to dispute with them and continue to put it up to them. And I, journalists here, have a duty and a responsibility to put it up to people like Owen Patterson and others who just, rattle away these statistics, which are absolutely meaningless in the grand scheme of things.
You might say they're meaningless, but he's able to say that there's a per capita grant of £10,662. He doesn't just pull that figure out of his head.
No, but the figure that he needs to deal with is the $18 billion that was promised to our executive prior to the establishment of the institutions in 2007. He went on the record, in fact, to the unions at Hillsborough Castle and said that he was going to stand by that. Nothing could be further from the truth. All of the evidence clearly shows that $4 billion is going to be withdrawn from our budget over the course of the next number of years.
One of the economic levers under
huge
discussion
hardships.
is corporation tax, but this is something which is being held up as some kind of panacea for Northern Ireland's economic ills. No one has any idea how that might work out, a reduced corporation tax. It would mean one thing, losing something like £300 million of government support, with no guarantee, as even the CBI has said, of that being replaced by a single job or a single company.
Well, first of all, nobody said that it's a panacea. All of our approaches have to be multifaceted. It is but one approach. The evidence is clearly there. It's clearly there in the South that foreign direct investment increased dramatically whenever the rate of corporation tax was lowered to 12.5%. Now, we have argued, we in Sinn Féin have actually led the way here in the North in relation to that argument, and it's now generally accepted by the vast majority of people.
Campaigned by people for 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, you're not the first people to do it.
Well, there were some
people.
people who were opposed to us looking.
There's still people opposed to the lowering of corporation tax, like the trade union movement.
But some people in the political parties, Noel, were opposed to the corporation tax being lowered. Now they accept the sense of it because. Why is that the case? Because we've been to the United States of America, and even in the face of not having lower rates of corporation tax, myself and Peter Robinson and others in the executive have been able to convince the New York Stock Exchange to come here with hundreds of jobs, City to provide hundreds of more jobs, Dow to come with more jobs. So more jobs are being attracted here, but we do believe that the case is compelling, that if corporation tax is available, then many thousands of more jobs will be created for our people. But we're not stupid, and we're not going to run on it. It has to make economic sense. If it doesn't make economic sense,
so you want to keep the subsidy and the lowered tax? Is that what making sense means? You want to keep the $300 million and the lowered tax?
What we will do, we will continue with the negotiations that we engaged in yesterday with the Treasury, myself, Peter Robinson, Sammy Wilson and Arlene Foster, and we will get either a deal that will work or a deal that the Treasury are not prepared to go to. What I'm really happy about is that the Treasury, who were resisting us from the very beginning, have now been forced to accept the arguments that we've been making.
Martin McGuinness, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.